Welcome to Green and Red, scrappy politics for scrappy people. A regular podcast on radical, environmental and anti-capitalist politics. Brought to you by Bob Bazanko and Scott Parkin.
Welcome to the silky smooth sounds of the Green and Red podcast. And this is your co-host, Scott Parkin, in the lovely San Francisco Bay Area today. And as always, I am joined by
Bob Bazanko in the lovely Mahoning Valley of Ohio area today.
Yeah.
Doesn't quite look like your background. So
we need to get you with a virtual background of the Mahoney Valley.
The abandoned factories that Trump is going to start up like tomorrow. Going to go in there, flip a switch, and they'll be making cars next week. It's amazing. No one thought of that. It's incredible. For 40 years, they've been sitting there idle, and no one ever flipped the switch to turn them on and make cars. I don't get it.
It's just if your car sits in your garage too long, you just need to change the battery and then you're good, right?
Yeah, that's all you got to do, man. Just flip the switch up, start making cars, bringing back all those jobs, man. We'll be riding high.
Yeah. And speaking of the sort of reset that we're seeing in this country, Bob, I'm actually excited to see that you're going to be on the ballot for the New York mayor's race in November. You're going not quite like Andrew Cuomo, forming your own third party to run, but still. I think I'm happy to go knock on doors for you through New York over the next couple.
I mean, the Democratic primary about which we'll talk scared me. It terrified me. We have these crazy communists now in America, like Mamdani. Communist lunatics like Mamdani. My God, I hear he's going to execute bankers on Fifth Avenue, throw Wall Street tycoons off the Brooklyn Bridge.
No, he's going to make them walk out on the ice on the Hudson Valley or the Hudson River before they fall through. You know, Chris Matthews predicted this in 2020, that if we see people like Democratic socialists elected in high office in this country, we're going to just start seeing executions in Central Park. And now Chris Matthews' worst fears.
Yeah. There's going to be dead bankers instead of dead bears for RFK Jr. to go take home, right?
Yeah, exactly. It goes strapped to the hood.
Strapped to the hood, yeah. It's dead bankers. They're going to have guillotines at Yankee Stadium. And it's just, I can't believe it. Yeah, we got to stop this guy.
Anarchy. It's going to be. He's not a socialist. He's an anarchist.
Oh, is he? I mean, he's all of that. He's all of it at once.
Islamic fundamentalist.
He's worse than Hitler.
Too. Yeah. Apparently.
More dangerous than Hitler.
So if you haven't already picked up on it, we're going to be actually talking about one of our favorite topics, which is how liberals and liberal Democrats punched left. And so we are seeing that in full force right now in the aftermath of the New York mayor's Democratic primary, where Zohran Mamdani defeated Andrew Cuomo and a number of other people, but also played a pretty smart sort of coalition game, and then also had this massive ground game where over 50,000 volunteers were knocking on doors for him all over the 5 boroughs. And he won. And he won in a significant sort of way where Cuomo actually just conceded he's not going to wait until the ranked choice vote happens, which I think is supposed to happen sometime in July.
By July 1st, yeah.
Yeah, by July 1st. And we should say we're recording this a little bit sooner than a little bit in advance of when you're probably actually seeing it. But what we're going to talk about today is pretty evergreen. We're just putting a little bit of context with Mamdani's victory.
Yeah, this is certainly not the first time we've talked about this, but you never pass on a chance to bash the Democratic Party, aside from whether the guy is really a socialist or what he actually believes or what he's going to do. Message matters. And the fact is he ran unapologetically as a critic of capitalism, as a supporter of Palestinian rights, as an advocate for what I would call working class issues, quality of life issues like rent prices, food prices, and so on. Affordability. And he won big. He and Brad Lander, who kind of tag team, combined for 55% of the vote, which is why Cuomo dropped out, and which is why I think, and we'll get to this, the ruling class, not just in New York, really, but nationally, is terrified. They're freaking out, and they're planning on how to stop this guy. But I don't think they're going to do it. We'll get to that. But I actually think he's in a pretty solid position to withstand what they're going to do. And it's going to get really ugly. We've seen this before, and that's what we're going to talk about. But I think you can't talk enough about the Democratic Party establishment. And I call them liberals because we're talking about traditional constituencies like labor and certain churches and ministers and so forth. do their damn best all the time to stop these kinds of people's insurgencies or whatever you want to call them. And they're doing it again. They're doing it again.
Yeah. And so what we're going to talk a little bit about the Democrats freaking out. We're going to talk a little bit about the billionaire class, the ruling class freaking out. And then we're going to talk a little bit of some recent history, probably 40 years or more, of like where we've seen this happen since we did a epic show a few years ago with Noam Chomsky about the 1972 election, which is when we really start seeing this sort of move to the right by the Democrats and bashing of their sort of left wing or their more socially minded, social justice minded wing. And we're just going to go into some of that history. And I was going to kick off with some of the more interesting details coming out of the New York Democratic primary, just like some of the freak out happening on the part of the billionaire class, which is like at some level is amusing, which is like why I wanted to kick it off. The first thing I'll say is that Mamdani's probably main opponent is going to be the sitting mayor, Eric Adams, who was elected as a Democrat in 2021, but quit the Democratic Party this spring to become an independent. He had been indicted by the Biden administration for taking bribes from Turkey. And then the Trump administration came in and dropped all of those charges. I'm sure it was an uncorrupt act on the part of Donald Trump. And that's weird. And since then, he's basically been carrying Trump's water in many ways in New York. He's been like allowing ICE raids to happen. Actually, ICE arrested like Brad Lander while he was escorting undocumented folks or migrant folks. I don't even know if they were undocumented, to immigration court in New York a couple of weeks ago. But since Mamdani has won, Adams has been having like high level meetings with all the business leaders in New York, because obviously he wants money to run against Mamdani, also because they are freaking out. Adams is going to be just one of the many conduits for them to stop the rise in socialism going on in America's cities. Probably the most noted billionaire that we've been hearing about is Bill Ackman, who is a big supporter of President Trump in 2024. He also dropped about $500,000 on Cuomo's super PAC. He has also now posted a series of tweets criticizing Mamdani's win, and which include turnout stats that the New York Times found that Mamdani won districts with median incomes over 100,000 by 13,000 points, but Cuomo won those with the median incomes of 50,000 by 19 points. And so trying to make a case that these more centrist Democrats are more in support of the working class, even though they take hundreds of thousands of dollars or even millions of dollars from the billionaire class. But basically, Ackman, who's also a big supporter of Israel, says that Mamdani is going to bring the global intifada to New York City government.
Wasn't Ackman a Democrat until fairly recently? And he's also the guy who's as responsible as anyone for these attacks on like Harvard and Columbia and Penn. So it's ironic, right? This is the guy who's going to defend working class interests in New York, Bill Ackman. And Michael Bloomberg is another one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's one I haven't mentioned yet, is Michael Bloomberg dropped like a third of the super PAC money that Cuomo got was from Michael Bloomberg, who doesn't consider Zohran a real New Yorker. And Mamdani was born in Uganda and is like an immigrant or a naturalized citizen. And people like Bloomberg are very unhappy about that, plus that he's a democratic socialist. Yeah. The other billionaire I just want to point out, there's another billionaire backer of Cuomo is a guy named Dan Loeb, who is out of the Third Point hedge fund, and he declared it's officially hot commie summer. And when Kathy Hochul, who we're not fans of here, called Mamdani's campaign formidable, which it is because it's like organized people versus organized money, he called her a clueless, unqualified buffoon. All of these guys are basically thinking that the guillotines are coming out and that we're going to see some sort of new environment in New York if Mamdani becomes mayor that's hostile to Jews and hostile to rich people and things like that. Whatever. I hope they are hostile to rich people, but there's a lot more wealth redistribution going on or something.
New York is we all know, anybody who's even visited there, let alone live there, it's expensive as hell. It's one of the most expensive cities in the world. And Mamdani suggested like government subsidized or government run food stores and rent control and just basic quality of life issues The striking part of this, and I do want to focus on the Democratic Party rather than all these rich guys, because the Democrats really are the problem here. And you expect Bloomberg and act what they do, right? That's their class interest. But Mamdani won. And this is the part of the story that's not really being talked about. Like, the guy won. He won big. If you combine Lander, which is fair enough, that's well over 50%. So the people of New York really went in on that, and they appreciated what he was talking about. And the only kind of groups that continued to support Cuomo were like those old Democratic groups like Labor. Many of the bigger unions endorsed Cuomo. Many of the churches and black ministers did. But really, Mamdani created a coalition, which, and you know how I feel about elections and electoral politics. But the reality is he reached out to people, and I think most importantly was unapologetic. He actually criticized capitalism, harshly criticized Israel. He said he would arrest Netanyahu if he came to New York. Did he say the same about Modi from India, maybe?
I think he has said that, yes.
I think he said that too. So it's an and that's important. Like, whether he's a Democrat or whatever, who cares? But I think the fact is he's shown, you know, a way, right? He's shown that we can criticize these people. We can run a campaign based on these quality of life issues or economic issues or affordability, whatever you want to call it. And that will resonate, right?
I want to throw a couple of things out, and then I want to talk about the one last billionaire who I want to quote, who's the billionaire of the United States. I just want to say one of his comments. But it was also very striking. So Cuomo had all these endorsements from big labor and churches, but the Democratic politicians that you see really turn out for Cuomo were actually very telling. I actually felt like when they came out on Monday, which was the day before the election, with the endorsement of Bill Clinton, it's like that was the kiss of death. That was like, well, one, Cuomo's desperate, and then two, I actually think that's a turnoff to a lot of people at this point to see like Bill Clinton endorse people. But we also saw Jim Clyburn come out. It's like, why is a congressman from South Carolina endorsing someone in the New York mayor's race? And so I think that's important too, is that he didn't actually campaign much. And my understanding is Cuomo didn't really have a ground game at all, and did a few media events, but just thought he was going to get by on running ads funded by Bloomberg and Ackman and all of these other people, plus name recognition.
He was Jeb Bush.
Yeah.
And the guy as a governor was a train wreck too, which isn't really part of this equation. But I think that's like, I suspect you'll talk about, I think I know who you're going to talk about. I think it's also important to mention, as you point out, Rahm Emanuel, Bill Clinton, Jim Clyburn, Cuomo himself. These are the old guard Democrats who have repeatedly been repudiated. In 2008, when Obama beat Hillary Clinton for the nomination, that should have been like a fire bell in the night, the old saying, and they ignored it.
Yeah.
In 2016, when Trump crushed Jeb Bush, killed him in its infancy of that campaign, that should have been a fire bell in the night. The Democrats ignored it, and they foisted Hillary Clinton, and so on. And you keep seeing this is part of the long trajectory of the Democratic Party. And I'll segue back to you in a minute, and this is something I say all the time, right? The Republican Party embraces Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, even though he's not in Congress right now, Boebert, Andy Ogles from Tennessee, who called Mamdani Little Muhammad, and just this incredibly racist, bigoted public tweet about him. And they embrace these people. They embrace Trump, who pardons Klansmen and white boys and Nazi deniers, Holocaust deniers, and stuff like that.
And real Nazis.
The Democratic Party, who every fucking 4 years shoves vote blue no matter who down your throat, is unwilling to accept the legitimate results of a Democratic election in New York. Fuck them. Just fuck them. I'm not going to be calm about it. There's nothing if there's some worse I could say about it, fuck them. Fuck the Democrats.
Yeah. And, to actually go along to put it in context is I'm going to read the quote from Trump about Mamdani. And I think this goes back to what our point is around the fuck the Democrats, the fuck the establishment Democrats. Trump said it finally happened. The Democrats have crossed the line. Zohran Mamdani, 100% communist lunatic, has just won the Democratic primary and is on his way to becoming mayor. We've had radical lefties before. This is getting a little ridiculous. And then he puts in all caps, he looks terrible. His voice is grating, and he's not very smart. He's got AOC +3, which must be some nickname he has for her. They're dummies all, backing him, and even our great Palestinian senator, crying Chuck Schumer is groveling over him. Yes, this is a big moment in the history of our country. And so I just want to say is that's unhinged. He puts out 50 texts like this a day, True Social Post or whatever you call it. And every day he's more unhinged. And yet the Democratic Party and other institutions in our society, which also were part of the problem, say the corporate media, treat this as normal. And then their response is that when someone has ideas that includes a little bit of redistribution of wealth, which and Donnie's probably a centrist when it comes in Europe, they act, it's Stalin is at the gates. And so I just want to point that out as we get into a little bit of this history of how the Democrats have they tell people to run in their primaries. They tell people to participate in their party. And then when they win, which is going to be some of the examples that we're going to have here in a second, then they destroy them, and illegitimately destroy them too.
We'll talk about David Hogg in a second too, within that context. But I think it's important. Mamdani's tax plan is 2% on tax on income over $1 million a year. So if you make 1.1 million, that means that it's 2% on $100,000, which is $2,000, right? So if you make 1.1 million a year, you're going to spend an extra $2,000 in taxes. Now, considering the tax rate even into the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it's still laughable. It's obscene. No country, no developed, advanced country has taxes like the US does. They're laughable. People in Europe, I can't believe American tax rates, right? So this is what Mamdani's threat is: 2% on income over $1 million. So there's that. But I think, what's also really critical here is that the Democratic Party is ignoring what's been going on the last several months. They live in fear. That is their only response to Trump is fear. Trump doesn't like us. Trump makes these unhinged tweets. And so we have to retreat, right? And what we're seeing in the streets in LA and in Chicago and on campuses all over the country for the past 18 months is a rejection of not just Trump, but also of the Democrats and also of that fear. And when Trump can't make people be afraid, Trump's tweet is irrelevant because he's insane. Anybody who calls Chuck Schumer Palestinian is unhinged. And it's not going to go anywhere. People expect that out of Trump. It's people like Emanuel and Clyburn and Clinton and Cuomo who destroy, and Chris Cuomo, his brother, and Hochul actually hasn't said anything, but I'm sure she's not real happy about it either. And those are the people who are really getting in the way and need to be rejected. And we're seeing that, I think, which is really encouraging. And Mamdani's campaign isn't like the people in LA fighting against ICE, but it is in that regard. There's still examples of people and what I would call street politics, rather than getting $20 million from a good billionaire, as the Democrats like to call them, and just running a bunch of ads.
I think that piece is really important. And when you have that sort of organizing and mobilization of people and having a ground game is something we saw that in 2008 with the Obama campaign. We definitely saw that in 2016 with the Sanders campaign, again in 2020. And they had to use unfair tactics to stop Sanders in 2016 and in 2020, and let these machine politics and let institutions basically undermine him. It's a lot of youth are very into this idea of organizing and mobilizing. And so David Hogg is one of those folks. David Hogg was a survivor of a mass shooting in Florida, has been pretty outspoken on social media. And since he's finished college, he has been working in the political world. And he recently was elected. They're elected to those positions, right? At the DNC. Yeah. And
like executive committee
and he was a vice president at the DNC or something like that, and made some comments about how the Democrats need to phase out their aging gerontocracy, which is something that a lot of people have been saying for a long time because it causes a lot of problems. We have Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court because of Dianne Feinstein not being in full control of her faculties, for example.
Committee. Gorsuch, because they wouldn't say anything to Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah, exactly.
And Hogg, and because a lot of people are portraying this just as age, Hogg also does want what he calls progressive candidates. He's not Gene Debs. This kid is not a radical. He's a liberal. And the fact that the Democrats have gone after him so vigorously, so vehemently, he's not on the Democratic National Committee anymore. And the attack on him was engineered by Pelosi's daughter. So who's Pelosi? I'm sure she feels the same way about Mamdani. I don't know if she's said anything publicly. She hates those people. Look at the way she would always go after AOC, right? So the way they go after Hogg and the way they're going after Mamdani, this should be the final death knell for anybody who thinks the Democratic Party can get us out of the wilderness, for anyone who says vote blue no matter who. We're at the point now how you and I always say Trump should be at 3% in the polls. Who the hell, unless you're like Peter Thiel, who the hell should support this guy? I think feel the same way about the Democrats now. They should be at like 10% in the polls. Like, other than these Wall Street guys, who the hell benefits from them? And the way they treat Hogg and the way they treat Mamdani and others we can mention. In Buffalo in 2021, in the primary there, the mayor's name was Byron Brown, maybe, or Brian Brown, I don't remember. But in the primary that year, a woman named India Walton defeated him.
It was also Democratic Socialist.
And what did the Democrats do? Did they say, oh, great, we're going to get a new Democratic mayor in Buffalo? Is that what they did?
No, the mayor who lost the primary ran as an independent and beat her because he got a bunch of Democrats and a bunch of Republicans, a bunch of independents behind him in the general.
Engineered by the Democratic Party. If they had stayed out of that, India Walton easily wins that mayor's race. So it wasn't about, because Democrats always talk about electability. That's bullshit. Mamdani has proven he's electable, right? We know that. He and Lander won 55% of the vote combined. He won 43% of the vote in a race like the person in the New York Times endorsed got less than 1%.
Which has also been running like attack articles on Mamdani since Tuesday night.
Yeah. I want to say this, just what you just said a minute ago reminded me of a really great story. Years ago, this would have been 1984 or 88? Jim Hightower, who's still around, and was it railroad commissioner or ag commissioner? What was he? Railroad commissioner, right? In Texas?
He was ag.
He was ag. Okay. And he won. And Larry L. King, the playwright, called him up to congratulate him. And Hightower said, they called me a communist. They called me a socialist. They said this, they said that. And we beat him anyway. And Larry L. King said, maybe that's why they voted for you. And I would say the same about Mamdani. None of this is secret. The attacks have already been there. That's the one thing that I think, what are they going to say now that Cuomo's campaign wasn't saying for the last several months?
That story about Hightower is actually a really good segue into what the next sort of example of this is, which is Bernie Sanders, which we have a lot of critique of. And the stuff around, just to front load it, the stuff around Israel just is really troublesome and messed up. But, Bernie is also, he's probably the most known Democratic socialist. He or AOC are the most known Democratic socialists in like public office today.
And Sanders is, like him or not, he's the most popular politician in America.
That was my point. I'm
sorry.
But yeah, no, that's okay. Sanders is literally, according to the polls last week, has the highest approval ratings of any politician in office, right? It's not recently in office. It's not Biden. It's not Harris. It's not Gavin Newsom. It's not Trump. It's Sanders. He has plus 36 approval. He's higher than AOC too.
She's way up there as well.
Yeah. And they have done everything they can since at least 2016 to destroy Bernie Sanders. And I will give him credit. He is tough and he has hung in there and still like pretty sharp too in many ways for an 83-year-old.
Oh, to listen to him speak after Biden and Trump, I'm actually honestly fed up with Sanders in a lot of ways too. And I think the way Mamdani dealt with in the mayor's debate, the big question was, what's the first foreign country you're going to visit? And they all obligatorily said, Israel, right? Israel becomes the template for being mayor of New York. But Sanders he's going to learn a lesson from Mamdani. Mamdani has talked about it very forthrightly about what's going on in Gaza. Sanders was on Joe Rogan a few days ago and continues this Israel has a right to defend itself bullshit. And going back to October 7th, he's never uttered the word genocide. I know he's critical, but it's always Netanyahu's war and Trump's war, and that's bullshit. I'm really tired of Bernie Sanders. I'm also very tired of the Greens too, because all these people do is vote, register and vote. Nothing beyond that. But I'm tired of Bernie. But you're right. Bernie Sanders, the whole Russia conspiracy bullshit, the hit was on Bernie Sanders, not on Trump. That crap they did was to get at Sanders, to get dirt on him initially. And then look at what they've done to AOC, the way Pelosi mocked her. Oh, what's that? The Green Dream? And they denied her a committee seat, which went to a 75-year-old guy who had cancer who just died
in office.
in office.
A ranking member seat.
A ranking, yeah. So and Mamdani spoke very clearly, and he won a quarter to a third of the Jewish vote. I've seen different things on that. And we're talking about with the biggest alarmism imaginable. He's going to do this. Reminds me of in The Godfather with Frankie Pentangeli. And Michael Corleone said this, and Michael Corleone said that. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? That's how they are. Mamdani said this, and Mamdani said that. Yeah, sure, why not? You can always find a Godfather reference, no matter what you're talking about. Right?
It's so true. So true.
Yeah.
But the final point on Sanders is that in both 2016 and 2020, when he was winning primaries and playing by the rules, is that the Democrats changed the rules on him. And a little less in 2020. In 2020, they just more ganged up on him. But Sanders won California. He almost won Texas in the Democratic primary in 2020. He was riding high. He won New Hampshire. He won Nevada. There was some sketchy stuff going on with voting machines in Iowa. Sanders ran a strong campaign 2 different cycles. It's also important to note that Sanders, there's a lot of language that more establishment Democrats or mainstream Democrats use, which is to me around a lot of like identity politics stuff. And he really talks a lot with the sort of class politics. And he's been on this Stop the Oligarchy tour since Trump came in. And I think that's important. I think that's raising consciousness. I also think he came out and endorsed Mamdani, so did AOC. And so I think that's some important stuff that was going on there as well. But I completely agree with you about Israel. I mean, I feel like the Palestinians have been sold out by the American political establishment for at least at the federal level, with the exception of Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar.
Yeah, Rashida Tlaib is amazing. She's the best. But still, it's important to understand when Sanders talks about this stuff, he's filling arenas in like Nebraska and Iowa and all these other red states, these rural areas. And
his crowds are bigger than Trump's.
I know. And that's not hard. I could probably fit more people in my living room than Trump. I was in DC a couple of weeks ago for the parade, and I was like, oh, shit, I don't want to be here. Traffic, it's going to be insane. It was empty and quiet. And then you saw the parade. We talked about it with Zach Henson. Is that his name? The parade was a joke, right? Sanders draws like standing room only crowds, and he talks about these issues. He's not talking about what are my pronouns or anything. He's talking about
red districts.
Red districts. And he's discussing the way people live their lives, not he, him pronouns or whether there should be trans kids in sports, something I actually don't have any problem with. And those are important issues. And Sanders has never ignored that. But the fact of the matter is, people are wondering, like, how are you going to pay for food? How are you going to pay for healthcare and so forth? How are you going to pay for rent if you're in New York? And the Democratic Party, like I said before, the Republican Party takes the fucking most batshit insane, reactionary, racist ideas from their right wing, and they go with it. And the Democrats ignore their most popular.
The Republican right wing, you mean?
Yeah. And the Democratic Party, the Republicans, nothing is too extreme for the Republican Party. Nothing. It's just not. It just doesn't exist. Democrats attack Bernie Sanders, David Hogg, India Walton, AOC, Mamdani now, right? Because they have class interest. And they're also gutless. There is clearly a big part. Mamdani is probably, I think he's going to be mayor. I would bet on it now. Not a ton, but I'd bet on it. If he's mayor, they're going to make life very difficult for him, for one thing. But he's not out to destroy New York City. He doesn't want to do that. Sanders doesn't want to do that. And you would think the Democrats would say, hey, we can win an election and get some shit done. But that part about getting shit done never fits into the equation.
No. I mean, like the central piece kind of with what you're talking of Mamdani's campaign was affordability, making New York a more affordable place for average New Yorkers, not the billionaire playground that it has become since Giuliani or whoever.
There's a governor's race in Virginia, and the Democrats, I think, are going to take that seat back. And their candidate is, what's her name, Annette or Annabelle? Abigail Spanberger, who ran as one of those national security Democrats. She's an ex-CIA agent, right? And she's always complaining about the socialist and the left and the Democratic Party. She punches left all the time, like the rest of these folks do, right? And this is what you get. You get Rahm Emanuel's being pimped as a 2028 candidate. If you want to guarantee that they'll lose in 2028. You put Rahm Emanuel up there. Guaranteed he will lose. Not even close. It'll be swamped.
Just because we're talking about Rahm Emanuel, I'm glad you bring him up, because like in 2006, he was the sort of campaign overlord for the midterms where the Democrats took back the House, they took back the Senate, like big sweeps. And the myth is that Rahm Emanuel's strategy in 06 was that he ran in these swing districts, prosecutors, veterans, ex-CIA agents, small business owners, and that's how they won, which is actually a myth. Harry Reid, who was actually, I would say, more on the progressive side for someone in the Senate, especially a Senate leader, he ran John Tester and Sherrod Brown, who actually both lost last year. But still, the 2006 is when they got elected. They both ran as populists in conservative places. Maybe Ohio wasn't as conservative in 06 as it is now, but still.
No, it wasn't. It was still significantly. And then a Democratic governor, I think, in the early 2000s, in fact, still.
Yeah.
Strickland may have been governor at the time.
Yeah. But it's just important to note that Rahm is going to run on this sort of thing. I know it's going to be the Liz Cheney strategy. It's going to be that it's going to be that, like, we know how to protect America, and we're not like, anti-democratic, little d democratic, batshit crazy. But that is like a myth. Like what Americans want now is like affordability on things. They want healthcare that doesn't put them in lifelong debt to save their lives. They want cheap groceries, all that.
And they're also against wars.
And they're against wars.
We were talking beforehand, before that we went on. Clearly, the housing crash, the economic crisis in 08 kind of put Obama over the finish line. But in 06, the Democrats won big because of Iraq. And then that was the centerpiece of Obama's campaign against Clinton. And I think he would have won anyway. By 06, 08, Americans were tired of the war in Iraq. And the Democratic Party, instead, that's why it's bullshit for Emanuel to say, oh, we ran national security. Democrats, like, the Americans were tired of that bullshit. And you're seeing that today.
I mean, and we've done many shows on Biden around Gaza and around around Ukraine. But I would actually argue in 2020, Biden ran on getting us out of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And so there was an anti-war element, and that was before Gaza happened. That was before Ukraine happened. And so there was an anti-war element to what Biden was doing in 2020 as well.
Yeah. And they're ignoring that. I am stunned. 53% of Americans now blame Israel for the problems in that region. And the only demographic that continues to support Israel is older white Republicans, right?
Yeah.
The attack on Iran, it's 60-16 against, right? The Democratic Party could, as we've pointed out many times, there's a show we did, about 6 months ago on liberal militarism, which I would encourage everybody to watch. Democratic Party has never been a party of peace. I see all these liberal memes around. Trump said he was a man of war and you didn't vote for Kamala. Like, Kamala or Biden would have attacked Iran even sooner than Trump did. And I doubt they would have withdrawn it. And you know damn well, and I know everything Trump does is symbolic and performative bullshit, but you know damn well Biden would have never said, what Trump has said about Israel. He's basically blamed them. And what did he say? They're going to get their fucking act. I forget what it was. Everybody focused on the fact that he used the curse word. He dropped an F-bomb rather than what he was actually saying. The Democratic Party, these issues really fall into their lap and they reject them, right? The kind of things that they allegedly speak for, working people, healthcare, non-intervention, and so on. That's all in their lap, and they ignore it. And they attack people. They attack Bernie Sanders on the war sucks, but they do attack people on the war, and they continue to believe that they need to continue to tack to the right. And
back to the left here.
What's that?
You said attack to the right. You mean attack to the left?
No, to tack, not attack. Tack.
Oh, sorry.
Tack to the right, which they've been doing. And before we go off, I do want to just do a very brief history of this again, just because you can't say it enough. But this is the problem. They actually have these issues. And Iran and Gaza are huge issues. Americans are tired of that. The other night, last night I don't watch the Colbert Show, but he had on, what's her name? Clarissa Ward from, I believe, CBS News. And I was really shocked. Not a radical critique, but Clarissa Ward said that the problem in the region, in the Middle East, is that most people there don't trust the United States. And it's because of Gaza, the lack of empathy. This is a CBS News reporter saying this. They don't say shit like that. They're national security people, right? And so it's all there. And Mamdani understands that, which is why I think in many ways he's savvier than like Bernie Sanders is. Bernie Sanders continues this. They have a right to defend themselves. It's Hamas's fault and all that kind of shit. It's not a genocide or whatever. Mamdani's, I think, like confronting this head on. which is why in the primary, and I'm sorry, in the general election, I'm not sure there's much they can throw against them if they haven't already done. Haven't they already tossed the kitchen sink at them?
In many ways, unless they're able to mobilize some base that didn't vote in the Democratic primary. It was like only 1 million people, I think, who voted in a city of 10 million. And so we'll see how they're going to, I think, one, we're going to see a lot of money spent, probably more money than any other New York mayoral race. And then two, I think the red baiting / Islamophobia is going to get really cranked up.
Yeah.
Is going to be my guess.
Oh, they've told you that. That's not even a secret. They're bragging.
But Tommy has a good program. He has a strong campaign. He has a good ground game. And then he also, if Adams turns out to be the primary opponent, then Adams is deeply unpopular because he is a corrupt SOB. Today he went on CNBC and talked about how New Yorkers don't want handouts. This is the guy who took like millions of dollars in bribes from the Turkish government, got indicted for it. So just to put that out there. Speaking of handouts,
he's got as much, if not more, baggage than Cuomo. And Cuomo the guy beat Cuomo. He beat like one of the first families of New York politics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like beating Jeb Bush, right? Or beating Hillary Clinton, right?
Yeah.
That's a signal. That's there's meaning to that. And so I think he's going to win. I don't have a dog in this hunt, but I do think he's going to win. And as mayor, he'll be a Democrat. He's way more Democrat than socialist. Let's be real. But the message is important. And I think the fact that he's willing to say things that people like you and I say is important. And people respond to that. Goes back to Larry L. King. Maybe they heard all that, and that's why they voted for you.
It's interesting, when I was doing like researches for this episode, I was looking at there's a long history of punching left, it goes way back, but like 1972, which we've done like whole episodes on, including with Noam Chomsky, about punching left on McGovern. We could probably do a whole other show on like the punching left of the like late 70s and 80s with Carter and Kennedy and Mondale and Jackson and Dukakis and Jackson and things like that. But I found, especially after Jimmy Carter died, we talked about this on the show, and then Bob did some other media around this talking about this, about how you really see, like Carter was like a centrist right-wing Democrat. But there's a famous quote from 1972 from a top Democratic official who said, McGovern is going to lose because we are going to make sure that he loses, which is, I think that like really says it about how the sort of corporate Democrats, the centrist Democrats really view when they see these threats from the left. Like they want to keep the McGovern, all the way from the McGoverns to Sanders out of the general election for the presidency. But like they do this at every level. And every once in a while, we see someone from the left really make a splash and get elected, like AOC or Harold Washington, who was actually the mayor of Chicago in the 80s, actually is another one. He's leftist who like had a surprise win for the Democratic machine.
Yeah, just briefly, because I think this is an important history, right? Even in 1964, the heyday of liberalism, the Republican Party nominated Barry Goldwater, who ran this campaign, which would become a template for Nixon and Reagan and now Trump. They're all pretty much the same, right? In 1968, the Republicans ran on this Southern strategy and Nixon won. 1972, McGovern became the nominee. And as you pointed out, the Democratic Party destroyed him. Jimmy Carter and Scoop Jackson led a move at the convention. They were trying to deny him the nomination as late as the convention, and they destroyed him. And after that, it became clear. Carter ran in 76. Carter, who was, we've said a million times, had an amazing life, just an amazing life. Unheard of in American political life to leave the presidency and do what he did. But he ran as basically, I'm not a Democrat, right? I'm different. He basically ushers in this era of neoliberalism, deregulation, rejects many of the programs of the New Deal, and segues perfectly into Ronald Reagan. Remember, in 1980, Teddy Kennedy ran against Carter in the primary, and Carter attacked him as being too much of a liberal, right? And then in 84, you have the Jesse Jackson campaign, which in 84 and 88 is really inspirational. And Democrats destroyed Jackson. They went after him. They called him anti-Semitic. This ain't new. This is not new, right? They called him anti-Semitic, and they attacked him on that. He was a socialist. He was this. He was that. And then that also gives rise to the creation of the Democratic Leadership Council, which two of the biggest people behind that were Bill Clinton and Al Gore, as well as a bunch of Gary Hart was important in that era. And it was a rejection. Basically, even though Americans still wanted health care and they still wanted affordable groceries and they weren't keen on foreign interventions, the Democratic Party rejected all that. They rejected candidates who spoke in that way. And they gave us Bill Clinton as president. And Clinton himself said, basically, we're running like Republicans. We run the country like Republicans. Clinton gave you welfare reform and the crime bill and so on. NAFTA. And then in 2000, Gore basically just, I'm not even sure what kind of campaign. It was a horrible campaign, which actually looks good compared to what we've seen since in a lot of ways. And then they went after Howard Dean and they went after Tom Harkin. And the Democrats, I call it not always just an infanticide, right? They're killing movements in their infancy that might have become something more than that, right? And then as a result, you get Obama, who sounded great. Hope you change your thing. I'm on your side. We're all in this together. And then what happens, right? As president, he squanders. He gives you a corporate healthcare reform bill, and then nothing after that. He won't even force Ruth Bader Ginsburg to resign. That would be uncivil. And this is also,
He built the banks out. He built the banks
out. Built the banks out. Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm the only thing that stands between you and the pitchforks, he told the people at Goldman.
Yeah.
And this is where we are. If you continue to shit all over people who have these concerns, they're either going to sit out, they're going to just bail, or they're going to start listening to people like Trump, who tells them you've been screwed. These big people have screwed you. NAFTA screwed you. China, Mexico, blah, blah, blah. When you don't have any countervailing argument there, people will listen to it. Why not? Which is why so many liberals every freaking day, all we see is fuck you if you voted for Trump. You're an asshole if you voted for Trump. I hate you if you voted for Trump. It's your fault you voted for Trump. Fuck around and find out, blah, 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 blah. All right. I don't think there was any reason to vote for Trump either, but like just insulting people who have been abandoned by the Democratic Party, by everybody. They've been abandoned and they listened to a guy who was bullshitting them. And they probably knew it, but he made the effort of speaking to them.
And just one step beyond that, I think it's important to note a lot of these folks, there's a lot of Latinos who voted for Trump. Like he made inroads with those margins. We just had a show on that with Enrique Ochoa. But all those folks were like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. He's deporting my cousin or he's deporting my wife or what have you. And this sort of liberal elite take on it is you're a moron. You shouldn't have voted for him. And to me, that is a organizing opportunity to bring those people back into a fold to be part of your coalition. And it's ridiculous and just not smart.
It's not always easy anymore to meet people where they're at, which is the old motto, the kind of mantra for organizing, meet people where they're at. It's hard. You don't have to meet everybody. Yeah, if there's many of Trump supporters who are immobile, fine, don't talk to them. Don't criticize, don't insult them and say, you're fucking stupid and you deserve what you get. I'm not sure that's in any way helpful. But there are people who are, like you just pointed out, there are people in that middle ground, farmers right now. There's this big story in a lot of media today about farmers in Nebraska who are really pissed off about they lost labor. China's not buying their soybeans and they're terrified. And they said, I voted for Trump.
All of their workers are getting swept up and not coming to work.
Yeah. And also in the packing houses, the meat packing plants as well. So go talk to them. Don't say, fuck you, fuck around and find out. That's what you get. You deserve it. Okay. Why would they listen to you if you approach them that way? It's just utterly insane. But Mamdani, from what I've seen, I haven't followed it that closely. Like I said, I don't have a dog in that hunt, but he does seem to understand that, I think, to some degree. And I think that's really critically important. And he also understands the vital importance of people being in the streets, as we're seeing right now. ICE is unpopular. Trump is really unpopular. That's the part that the media really doesn't focus on enough. He's also unhinged, which is media. If the media treated him like they did Biden, we'd be better off, right? Because he's batshit. Biden was old and addled. Trump is cognitively impaired and deranged, right? But there's people in the streets right now, thankfully, ignoring that. They're ignoring the media. They're ignoring the Democrats. And it's funny, too, isn't it, that the media's fallen in love with, even when they do disagree with Trump, they fall in love with Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. Newsom and Bass, and you're Californian. You speak, maybe if I'm wrong, but their issue is that Trump has federalized this, right? That he's sending out National Guardsmen and Marines instead of, but they don't have any problem with the state police or the LAPD beating the shit out of people. And the liberal media loves that. They're standing up to Trump, but they're not attacking what ICE is actually doing, the basis of what ICE is doing. No one makes like any kind of affirmative argument for these immigrants other than it should be, it's like the line in Animal House. They can't do that to our pledges. Only we can do that to our pledges. And I feel like that's what Karen Bass is saying.
Definitely what Gavin's saying.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a long process. It's been going on. If you take 72 as the starting point, we're dealing with that over 50 years now. And the Democratic Party has just continued to go further and further off to the right. The idea that there's an extremist left running the Democrats, and people believe that. And again, you say it enough and nobody challenges that. You know, as soon as Republicans said the extremist left is taking over the Democratic Party, the Democratic Party said, oh my God, they're right. We better go even further to the right. And this is what they do. And it's insane to think that, and they compare like AOC to Marjorie Taylor Greene, which I have plenty of issues with AOC, but Jesus Christ, you take her 100 times out of 100 over Madge Green, you know, who, although Madge Green schooled AOC last week on Iran, didn't she?
I would actually say that she's whatever. I'm not in the Marjorie Taylor Greene camp. Let's just be clear. But she is one of the leading anti-war with Iran voices out there right now.
And she criticizes Israel.
Yeah, and she criticizes Trump. She's criticizing Trump.
Yeah.
And I would think that would be the third rail Republican politics.
Yeah.
Third rail Republican politics. And she and a number of Gates is doing it. Tucker Carlson, maybe the leading voice of the anti-war.
Actually has been,
Yeah. It's a fascinating dynamic. I actually think that's why Trump is somewhat backed off on some of the stuff that he was like putting out about it. I think he's chicken shit anyway, but I think part of it is because his MAGA base is like getting unruly about it.
Yeah. Plus, despite the differences the different stories you're hearing from the Pentagon and from the IAEA and so on, I don't think the attack on Iran did much. Trump telegraphs things. He tells people ahead of time what he's going to do. I got to believe a lot of that shit was moved out, a lot of the centrifuges. They cleared the areas. I think this is all a performative thing where Trump and the Iranians can both make these claims and walk away from it.
Yep. We should probably wrap. Just a note for a future episode, I do think it would be interesting to talk about the punch left, get into more detail on the punch left of the Democrats in the 80s, because we've talked about Carter some, but getting into it more about Mondale and Dukakis and Jesse Jackson, I think would be interesting.
Yeah, the DLC. Yeah.
And I think the story of Harold Washington is actually very interesting and instructive as well. But we will not do that today. Folks, you've been listening to the wise words of the Green and Red podcast on the state of Democratic politics, where while we are, neither of us live in New York, we are supporting Zohran Mamdani becoming the next mayor of New York. And we hope to see it happen for, if no other reason, because we'll see so many people go batshit over it.
Exactly. You want to see their heads explode. Yeah,
exactly. That's what we're hoping for. If you like us, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us a rate and review. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening to this on an audio platform, give us a rate and review. And then if you really like us, go to greenredpodcast.org, hit that support button, or become a patron at patreon.com patreon.com/greenredpodcast. And we actually have a lot of really good episodes out right now. And so please definitely check those out. We recently talked with Professor Enrique Ochoa about sort of history of the migrant community in Los Angeles. We've talked with Tim Shorrock about the 75th anniversary of the Korean War. We talked with Zach Henson about military descent under Trump, and lots of other stuff too. So please check it out.
Iran, great show.
Yeah, Iskander Siddiqui on Iran. I've got a lot of good feedback on that episode. So definitely check out some stuff, because we're putting out some great magical episodes here lately.
They're amazing.
It's the most amazing. The most amazing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
They're just perfect shows. People love them.
Yeah.
And we bring them to you. You're perfect, beautiful hosts.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
No one has ever done this in the history of the world.
And we're good looking, and our voices don't grate, and we're really smart.
We're stable geniuses.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll talk to you later. Make trouble, misbehave, and we're out later.
are spreading the news. I'm living today. I want to be a part of it. New York, New York, these vagabond Joes are longing to stray